what we're going to run through. This is a new bit of kit that we're working on. It's not quite live yet, but what it has done is given us an opportunity to kind of really understand how the interaction between kind of having information about social prescribing, putting AI out there as like a chatbot to see what's happening. And in the delivery of it, we've been working with a team in Peterborough City Council who've pulled together like a huge corpus of information. So we've actually learned quite a few bits along the way. Um, so just kicking off, today is Social Prescribing Day, hence we're doing this. And just a shout out to the National Academy for Social Prescribing, NASP, who run Social Prescribing Day and actually do a load of stuff about kind of like key worker skills links, other webinars, loads of sessions, stuff like that, ton of resources. And just kind of put a spotlight on it today. That's their website, and they do tons of cool stuff. So we'll be sending out this and kind of following up with them over the course of coming weeks. And who are we? We are Datnexa. We're an impact innovation partner, which is just a $10 word of saying we use new technology and like change management and things like that in the public sector or working with those people who are often in public life. So we kind of work across a range of sort of organizations in that space. We were established in 2023 and our strapline is big ideas, bold technology for a better tomorrow. So we work a lot with local government colleagues. We work with some central government, NHS, that sort of thing. Yeah. So with no further ado, I'll crack on. So what we're talking about here in terms of social prescribing, it has quite a lot of different names. People refer to it as different bits, but essentially it's this sort of like corpus of information and services that fall into practical support, emotional support. It's strengths-based stuff. It's helping people live well, live independently, live the best lives that they can. It's part of this wider prevention agenda. I know prevention is a bit of a political hot potato in terms of the language around it, but I think it's this idea of there are often things that people can do or be supported to do in their community that will take pressure off healthcare settings overall. It's something that's good at like because it's out there, it's kind of often tackling the socioeconomic problems that sit behind stuff and that health inequalities piece. And often, you know, there's a huge amount of stuff within the voluntary and community sector going on. With the local authority piece as well, I think, you know, what's interesting is we've kind of done research in the background of this, is that often there are services that can be commissioned or may have been commissioned that are not being utilized as much as they could be. And actually we're seeing this as kind of like a means by which we can signpost effectively to things that are going on. And some of those are actually not just like in terms of the offline world or in real life. There's a lot of things where you kind of see really good apps and kind of other AI tools and information that's online that can be very quickly signposted and kind of help people help themselves as quickly as possible. So that's kind of what we're up to. Specifically in terms of Peterborough, what our objectives, you know, kind of the objectives that were set overall is kind of echoes on from that. So it's thinking about how can we help residents access the information, the advice, the guidance that they need across this suite of stuff. How does that tie into early prevention and kind of intervention and kind of making sure that we're getting to people early as possible? So, you know, kind of that before they reach other services. How do we kind of like foster that network approach across community within the local area? And actually what sort of self-service is available for people? Again, this idea of like helping people to help themselves and putting them in the right sort of area for what they need. So that was kind of like the objective, and the means by which we can do that is kind of the AI piece, which we've kind of done a quick overview of, but if there's any specific questions, just hold them on to the end and then we can kind of dig into a bit more information then. So what we were kind of looking at, and we've given it a little avatar, but it will actually appear in a lot of different places. And what we kind of realized was that there was a lot of potentially a lot of routes into this, but actually what they would be looking for is a range of different use cases. So it's not going to be someone coming to the site and kind of just going, right, I need social prescribing today. What can I do? It's about kind of understanding all of the different ranges of circumstance that could then be translated into a need for social prescribing without it being directly stated. So thinking about that, also we've kind of got these different audiences of people who would be using it. So it could be that, someone asking for themselves, which I think, is way, certainly to kick off, I think where my mind certainly first went. But then also this idea of people who are caring for other people who are helping out with other people. And also actually, there's often a lot of stuff going on, and to expect professionals who are directing and signposting to remember or know everything that's there is a very tall order, especially when you've got services swapping in and out. So I think this kind of idea of being able to service several different audiences with the same sort of knowledge base was again an important piece. The idea here was to, oh, could you mute, please? Hear myself. Cool. So the idea here is that the robot, the AI, is kind of working behind the scenes. So what you're having is a very natural conversation. So it's not expecting people to kind of like use specific keywords or stuff like that. It's really allowing people to have a chat in a very natural way. So really meeting people where they are. And then allowing that sort of set of information that's given with some clarifying questions, with kind of like a broader understanding of what's available, to look at what they've said, put that into context, and then provide the answers and kind of the suggested signposts and stuff like that. Also, in that sort of clarifying process, there's sort of almost a sense of um, triage, or kind of like working out what the best answer is, and also thinking about the tone of it and like the prompt of it and the behavior of it to really emphasize the strengths-based piece as well. So actually, it's a supportive voice. It's not just kind of like oh, you said these keywords, da da da, here is a list of stuff. It's actually thinking about, what your circumstance is. It's having that conversation, and it's a very natural chat. So I think that's kind of like a key part of it. The brief that we were set by the director, kind of like the senior responsible officer on the project, was something that was simple and something that was relatable. And I think this idea of meeting, this is really the benefit of using this AI stuff overall, is that it is tremendously good at being able to talk to people and kind of meet people where they are. So that's kind of the reason why we went into this chat piece. The chat itself currently resides in sort of like a web format, like a window sort of setup. But that's just an interim stage as it kind of evolves into things like the website will be there, but also things like WhatsApp for professionals internally, Teams, for colleagues who are kind of drafting emails back out. It can kind of appear as kind of take that information, put it into suggested email formats. There's a lot of ways that it can then appear once it's being created, but that's kind of like the beating heart of it. Oh, and that is just a wall of yellow, just to give you a little bit of a thing. Now, what I am hoping to, oh, here we go. The video has now appeared. Now, Yin, who is working on the project and pulling everything together, has filmed us a quick demo. And I'm hoping that if I press this button, it will appear and we'll be able to see it.
Hello, I'm Yin from Datnexa. We have developed an AI chatbot for Peterborough City Council called the Social Prescribing Chatbot. I'm going to show you a sneak peek of it today. I'll start with a scenario. It's around loneliness in older age.
So hopefully that gives you a flavour of kind of how it works. Um, Before I go into guardrails, there's a few kind of aspects there. I think kind of what you're looking at there is very much the early stages of where this stuff can go. But already it's doing things like getting the information very quickly, kind of contextualizing what's going on, being able to reply to people in a tone that works, for their circumstance and is kind of sympathetic, empathetic to what they're up to. Um, there's also kind of, I think, kind of the potential as this stuff starts moving into like voice and things like that, where actually that conversation actually becomes even more natural and even more kind of like easier to do. So it kind of takes away some of the like a typing interface and stuff like that. One of the pieces that we have in there is this idea of a guardrail, of a guardian, of a safeguarder. So actually, the way that it's working at the moment is there's one agent that's there that's kind of fielding the questions around social prescribing and kind of understanding that part of it, and another that's on the lookout for anything that may lead to a safeguarding issue. And as soon as that's spotted, the other agent intervenes and immediately directs the user to a human and kind of says, "Well, this is not to be dealt like this. Please call us." That piece is incredibly important to us and kind of ensuring that you've got something that is able to kind of interject and just put those guardrails in from the get-go. I think it's like really like kind of critical to the way this works. So even as a tool like this can kind of like build out and ingest more information and kind of be able to have social prescribing, early intervention, all the way through to kind of directing people to service or even performing services. Just having this overarching guardian there who's able to come in and just cut off whenever there's anything that falls into safeguarding is again kind of like a key design feature in kind of how this works. Um, as you saw there, the agent's able to kind of go through and look for relevant activities. It's asking those questions, kind of going back and forth, and then it kind of goes back and looks at its knowledge base. The knowledge base kind of contains a lot of content within it, and it will end up, ingesting a huge amount of content. All of that will be weighted, so it kind of knows what is the most important bit, what's the, kind of like the most recent bit, what's the most sort of relevant bit, and then it kind of maps that against the conversation it's had and then provides that answer in that summary format and then offers to provide that information in different ways. So you can kind of download the PDF, not the most kind of like smallest chunk of stuff. I think kind of when it starts moving into things like, would you like me to text that to you if you let us know your number? And I think that's kind of where it starts to get even further granularity. But at the moment, what it's doing is, and I think kind of not to diminish it with all of this AI stuff, is it's working with the person to find out what is the best fit and going through those questions and being able to do that in a strengths-based way is actually quite a leap forward for kind of this sort of prevention piece and this sort of early intervention element. It will stay up to date, which I think is kind of like a key part with a lot of this. So what it's doing is it's looking at this knowledge base, which itself is drawing in from different sources. So as things are being updated, it reflects that in the bot, which again I think is kind of in terms of jobs to be done for busy colleagues is just kind of takes one off. It's also beginning to we're kind of in the foothills of really understanding what you can do with this in terms of having like not just a librarian but an archivist, some other agent that's able to look over all the information that's there, understand duplications, similarities, conflicts, things like that, which is only natural as you begin to kind of aggregate data sets and kind of knowledge bases from around what is often quite a rich series of websites within a local authority. So if you kind of think about kind of like information networks, VCS providers, what's on the local authority site itself. If you were pointing someone to a coffee morning, it may be that actually the coffee mornings have different start times in different places. Being able to have something that's automatically able to just peruse everything that's there and go, hang on, we've spotted this, helps to enrich and improve that information underneath in a relatively low effort way for the humans who kind of need to make sure that, provide that quality assurance piece. The idea of also kind of like saying what's important, I think, is again a really kind of like critical point here. What that means is that perhaps for the first time you're able to look at all of the information that's there and kind of really say, kind of give it that weighting. So it means the human judgment and emphasis and kind of like the overarching corporate strategy is able to be reflected in a way that doesn't mean delving into the code or messing around with like the gubbins of the AI. It's really about thinking how the knowledge is weighted. So I think that again is a really exciting piece and will become something that we become a lot more familiar with, as a profession over time. This also kind of brings us on to another thing which I think is new and we've kind of seen on other AI tooling. But being able to look at the Q&A and kind of the questions and what's going on is a tremendous source of intelligence and insight as people providing care within the community. So it could be things like seeing which questions are being asked from which areas. And as you saw there, kind of understanding people's postcodes or where they are is useful in giving them specific things. But if all of a sudden you spot, like a spike in demand for something in an area, that's something that can be passed on to commissioning colleagues. And kind of allows you like another way of understanding what's going on. It also, as we kind of go through it, you're able to spot what isn't there as you put kind of knowledge together and you see what's going on. So it may be that there's a service there, but there's no times behind it. It could be that a service is missing in a particular area, in the sense that kind of when you put it all together, there's just one that's not been added. Also, over time, you're able to understand, kind of like who's using it and where they are, and then building that into something that actually means you can do a gap analysis and find who isn't being served, not just what isn't being served, but who is not getting what they need. So I think this idea of kind of being able to come full circle with it and look at the performance of it and the metrics of it in the way that, in things like marketing, for instance, they've been using like search engine optimization to work out what content goes where and to drive up rankings. Actually, with this, because it's a more expressive and more detailed interaction, there's a lot of information there that can be used appropriately within all of the right kind of like governance to help inform service provision. So again, this is just scratching the surface of this, but I think again a very exciting thing. The idea of an archivist, I think, and the idea of a is for the content, and I think the idea of the analytics is good for kind of like the service provision. Also, there's another piece in terms of the performance of the bot itself. So thinking about how it's performing, how many questions it's answering, whether it's actually satisfying residents' needs, whether people are happy using it, and whether, in some cases, people prefer using always on tools because they can just, when they need it, it's there. They're not waiting on a phone line or waiting for an email to come back. It will be able to understand its knowledge base and kind of say what it needs to do to keep it in high quality. And I think with this kind of understanding risks and what's going on within it is something that really allows the humans to focus on that part of it and kind of evolve it going through. So that's something that we're kind of very excited to do. And with previous projects like Hey Geraldine, we've actually seen an evolution of kind of like the human roles behind the AI tooling as these things go into production over the course of the years. So we're thinking of it as a new member of the team. It's really capable and it knows a lot of stuff, but it was literally born yesterday. So how do we onboard it and how do we ensure that it sensitively works and it kind of offers the right information at the right time for the right people? So all of this is kind of a new area and something that we're working through, and kind of hopefully we'll be able to come back and explain, how we solve some of these problems and what we think is the best route. We're very keen to kind of like co-design and collaborate on this as well. So any thoughts, please do let us know. And I think this iterative design phase with the right people is one of the key things, not only to innovation with AI, but also ensuring that you have something that is like sovereign and right for your local authority. Just a quick note here on the basic architecture of it for anyone who's kind of interested. What we have here is kind of end users. So running left to right, you've got the end users, you have the chat interface, you have an agent, and you have a knowledge base, and that knowledge base is drawing from several different sources. what this allows us to do is to we could have very many pink boxes there all speaking to the same agent, which is then looking at the same knowledge base. We're also able to have many different sources into that knowledge base. In thinking about how that knowledge base is managed, it then kind of gives us a flexibility to kind of put that content wherever it need be. And that could then, kind of just be pulled into all of the VCS kind of like partners' websites. The agent could just pop up there and kind of offer a broad stroke across the piece. It kind of really, once it's in that format, is quite malleable, it's quite extensible, and it's quite repeatable. Also, this is a sort of like pattern or like a structure can be replicated across different organizations, different local authorities. And what we're doing with this sort of approach overall is actually, once done, making it more of a push button sequencing. So actually the kind of like the work that needs to be done to get one of these in situ is understanding where the knowledge is, and then that sort of waiting and honing and iterative innovation process, instead of like the development piece, which traditionally has been a barrier, I think, to kind of doing these bigger projects because of the cost of it. Whereas if we can just make it like a push button, then it's something that can be used very quickly, and then it's all about the quality of the knowledge and the interaction, not the code and the dev and stuff like that. So we're really excited about this. Where this then kind of gets bigger is we're now looking at doing not just social prescribing, but children's services, prevention, early help, housing services, regulatory services. So all of a sudden, you've kind of got several of these sorts of agents. And then in front of that, we're going to have what's known as an orchestrator, or like a concierge that's able to meet people at the front door and kind of say, hey, what's on your mind? Understand that, and then go off to all these different agents. So actually, it's not just kind of, because I think we all know a lot of these issues are kind of like cross-cutting, and actually there's several different sorts of support that could be provided. So being able to kind of pull all of that together and just give people what they need, and then that concierge being available via all those different channels as well, suddenly kind of changes this from just talking about social prescribing into a fully integrated front door offering that then can go into different spots. So that again is something that we're kind of building up and going through on. So yeah, that's kind of just a bit on architecture. The future. Oh, I should have hopped onto this slide. Yeah, so we're working across all of these different knowledge bases. Actually, then making it something that's available at the point of need for staff, I think, is another exciting part. And that can be things like providing information while drafting emails, or kind of assisting people in call centers. I think kind of the idea of being able to share this with other organizations. So if you imagine having your front door as a chatbot for every GP in the area, that's super cool. There's a lot of ways that this could work. And then you kind of think how it could extend into people's worlds. So this technology overall plays well with others and is easily recreated. So I think, again, that's really exciting as people who are thinking about, well, how can we innovate, but actually how can we deliver for people, and how do we like socially prescribe more? I think with this, taking the technology off the table as like a blocker is useful, and being able to say, well, I've seen this here, that sort of pattern works for me. How quickly can I either use what's that there is, or because we all have different technology stacks and kind of stuff to deal with, how quickly can I repeat that pattern where I am? So that is it